minimal APIs. Microsoft has brought this feature with a very minimal architect approach, okay? So that you could just in just one line of code you could wire up an API, more like you did with Node and Express. You could just spin up a server, all right? But enough with me talking. Let me show you this in code, right? So I want you to go to Visual Studio 22 and I want you to say create a new project, and we're going to mimic a blog application. So it'll be a blog API that returns a blog item or items. So I want you to select the ASP.NET Core Web API template. You're going to click next, name it blog API, okay? Hit next. I want you to keep everything as is, okay? Make sure the framework is .NET 6, and I want you to uncheck use controllers here. Use controllers, and check that. This will give you the ability to use minimal APIs, and it will not scaffold all the code that's needed for you to run controllers. So I want you to click create. So it's going to scaffold for you the minimal API, just minimal, as the word says. Our app is scaffolded. I want you to go to the program.cs class and let's just look at it for a minute. We've got our builder there. It's a web application builder. This loads up our app. But for us to build, we go and have some dependencies, things that we depend on, services, okay? In our case, the only things that we're depending on are what we call the Swagger services, right? This enables us to test our API in the browser, and you're gonna see it shortly when we get to code. Once you give it your dependencies, you're going to build that app, okay? And it's going to return what we call a web application object, okay? And then on top of this app, you can add what we call middleware. So things like we want to use the Swagger UI, okay? We want to use HTTPS. So these things right on top of that, okay? To add more functionality to our pipeline. You could add things like authorization, you could add authentication, you could add custom middleware like error handling and whatnot. So you see that out of the box, Microsoft gives us a functionality there, and we could try it out. So I want you to click Control or F5. And you see that it loads a beautiful interface, and this is Swagger UI. This is what we put it over here, okay? So we have added something to the pipeline, all right? And there's a GET request. If you click GET, try it out, and execute, it just gives you a list of weather forecast, okay, of a day, and they were forecast, okay? But we want to understand the concept from scratch, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to delete that array, delete that endpoint, and delete the record, okay? We're going to use classes because records is C#10, so we'd have to do a class on that for you to understand. And we're trying to keep it at a bare minimum. So we want to create a class which is going to house our blog. It's going to give it its characteristics, okay? So class blog, and we want to keep it at a very minimum. It's going to have an ID that uniquely identifies that blog, all right? And every blog has a title, okay? Every blog has a title, so we have title, and every blog has content, right? What's a blog without content? So string content. So this code will be made available on GitHub. I'll leave the link in the description, okay? So our goal here is to learn how to hook up, wire up minimum APIs in order to do data access. So we're going to use a list as our data store, okay? All right. And there's a reason why app.run comes last, because after you've added your middleware, it's when you run. So make sure this is last, otherwise you fall into errors. All right, so we need to have our built-in data store, okay? So our data store, okay? Data store, okay? Think of it like your database, could be your cache, could be your file, but it stores data, okay? So we're gonna use a list. So we're gonna call the list blogs, okay? So it'll be a new list of blocks. Right. I want to create 2 entries so that we have some start data. Okay. So we're gonna have ID of 1. Title is gonna be intro to minimum APIs, and content, we could use the next line. We're going to say we are going to implement minimum APIs, right? And we could have a second. Don't worry about the blue squiggle lines. The purple are just telling me that this, since I haven't rebuilt it, it's not going to see those in the next until I do the second time. Okay, I guess the best thing is just to rebuild it so that error goes away. All right, so I did 2. And if you're interested in building APIs the normal way with controllers and whatnot, I have a course that I'm doing, so you could also check it out. I'm going to leave the link in the description. I'm also going to put it in the video there. So into the APIs, we're going to implement APIs with controllers. Okay, APIs with controllers. All right. So we've got 2 entries. So our data store has 2 entries, right? Now, what we want to do? So basically, an API does CRUD. It creates, it leads, it updates, and it deletes, right? So we're going to implement all. All right. So we want to get all blocks. All right. We also want to get a block by ID. Okay. You also want to create a block. All right. You might also want to update a block. Okay, there's a type or something, you want to change something. Okay, you might also want to delete a block. Okay, we've got a concept with getting all blocks. Okay, now, like I said, this app is what we're going to write on to add additional functionality, right? So on this app thing, we want you to give it the ability to map to a GET control. So map GET. So what does it take as an argument? It takes the URL. Okay, so I'm going to use the classical REST API standard, so API/block, right? Now when you hit that in your browser or in your API client, it's going to run a function, okay? And that function is going to run, it's called a dead get, right? And that function, we want it to return our list, but we want the list to be API friendly in terms of the response. So there's an object called results. Okay, results dot okay. So you want the API client to get a 200 that it worked and to also get the blocks. And my friends, with just that line of code, we have done a get or request. How do we know it's function? I want you to press Ctrl F5, and we're gonna check it out in the browser. So it's gonna open for us the beautiful interface. There comes Swagger. You will notice it's get there. So click get. All right, then let's try it out, and I want you to click execute, and there you go. In one line of code, we've hooked up an API. The word minimal is really minimal. All right, you might say, okay, I'm used to using POSTMAN. It's fine. This is our URL, right? So just copy that and go to POSTMAN. Now, for you to have a proper way to do these things, I use collections. So collections, there's a plus button there. We're gonna call this collection blocks, right? Then we're gonna like click on the blocks and say add a request. We're gonna call that request get all blocks. All right, press enter. What's your URL? It's that. All right, and click send, and there you have it. So the 200 OK there is coming from the results.OK. All right, and then we've got our request, our response body. There you go. All right, let's proceed. Our next operation is to get a single block. Again, we want to write on the map, on the app, then say, okay, this map should have a map get, okay, because that's again a map get. Okay, so where do you want to hit? You want to hit API/block. But since we want to get by ID, then we have to give it an ID, and that ID is dynamic, it changes. Then you're going to decorate it with a pair of curly brackets. Okay, and then you're going to say fine, when you hit that, I want you to run me a delegate. But here it's different because this delegate function needs to have an ID for it to get. So we're going to give it an int ID. Okay, now this was possible to do in one line because it's one line, but in our case this could be tricky because it could span multiple statements in terms of logic. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in curly brackets. All right, and we're going to do that. Okay, so we want to go to our list and find that ID. So we're going to say var blog post. And for those that might wonder what var does, var is just, it's going to check in real time that what is that. So this one knows that, okay, I am a list. Okay, if you want, you could actually put the word blog here to text explicitly. It's all the same. So var is good because it's three letters. It saves space. You could have a long object name. Okay, now so we want to find a blog post in what? In that entry. So in blogs, we're going to use first or default. First or default returns the first element of a sequence or a default value if the sequence does one that element. So first or default, and we're going to use the lambdas here. So we're saying in here there's an ID. That ID, check it. So B going to be, this is in this. Okay, so this is a predicate. ID should be equal to that ID, right? Now we want to check because a good API needs to understand. Okay, needs to handle all possible scenarios. So if we've checked and we haven't found, we want to tell the user of the API that whatever you're looking for is not found. So you're gonna say results dot not found. Okay, not found. If that evaluates, then not found. Otherwise, you're going to say return result dot okay and give it the blog post, and you're going to give it the blog post. Okay, let's try that again. Control F5. It's going to take us to a browser. And it refreshes, and there we have get by ID. We have two entries. Let's try the ID number 2. You put it over there, and we get it. You put something that doesn't exist, well, you get a 4.4. A 4.4 is what doesn't exist. You could say, okay, I also want to do it in Swagger. Okay, I mean in Postman. It's fine. Then go to Postman. Under blogs, create a request, call it get blog by ID. It's a get request, right? And what does it do? It gets a blog request. Okay, it gets a blog request. So if I give it 1 and I press search send, you see it gives me a 200 over there and it gives me my response. If I do a 3 that doesn't exist, it has to give me a not found 4.4 there and nothing in the body. All right, our next order of business is to, well, let's create. All right, again, map. So creating is posting, so you're gonna have to map to a post. So I'm using RESTful approach as well. We're gonna hit the same resource, which is .blogs, okay, but the operations will be different, but that's the same resource. That's what it means, okay? But for you to hit it, then you have to give it the whole blog, right? Because you want to give it a blog. So blog. So if I give you that, then you're gonna have your dedicate over there, you're gonna have that over there, down there, right? Then how do you add something to your list? All you say is blogs dot add blog, and you're done. And you can return, tell the guy that results dot is it created? We've got an error. Let's just put okay for now. All right. So we're telling them that, well, that blog has been created. All right. Control F5. All right. So Let's go check it out. So first of all, we've got post over there, but we have to check what we have in our we've got 3 now. Let's create. So post, try it out. It needs 3 things. It needs ID, so let's call it 3. It needs a title. Well, we could call it the title. This could be a C# crash course. If you guys have been asking me for a crash course, I think I should work on that. Should be there shortly. Can we learn it in 24 hours? In 24 hours? You could comment in the description if it's possible, and it would be in 24 hours. Alright, so execute. And 200, so it's created. Now let's go to get all to verify. Get all, there you have it. If you want to do this in POSTMAN, you want to come to POSTMAN, you're going to add a new request to the blogs. You're going to call it create blog. Alright, create blog. Now that request is going to be a post request, and your endpoint is going to be the same, okay, because we're doing REST. It's the same resource we're working on. So I want you to copy this endpoint. You would copy this, you copy it over there, it's fine. If only I can know how to copy these things. And for guys who use PHP, that's curl, right? Alright, so this is where we want to hit. But post is different from get, because get, you're giving it your ID in the request URL, but for post, you send it in a response, in a request body. Right, so keep that in mind. Excuse me. You'll see that there is body there, so it expects a body. I want you to put raw body and specify it as app.json, because we're using JSON, right? And the body takes in. So the first thing you do is give it a curly braces. Okay. So what's our object over here? We've got ID. So the first thing is it's ID in what? In brackets. I mean in quotes, in double quotes. And our ID here is an int, so it expects an integer. So if it's an int or a number, it doesn't have quotes. If it's Boolean, it's true or false, no quotes. So ID should be 4. The next thing it expects is title. So again, you're gonna put the title. You're gonna put the title in quotes. Okay, and there's a comma there. There's no equal to sign. It's a full colon. Okay, those are the mistakes I made when I was starting up. So title would be Blazor, right? And Blazor should have content, so you're gonna have content. Can we really build apps without JavaScript? That's what Blazor does. That's called we're trying to build apps with C# only or F# without using wholly the JavaScript. So that's another course I might do later on. So this is enough. Then let's send, and that gets a 200, so it's created. All right, if you go to get all blogs request over there and send, we should have 4 now. Nice. What's next? So I'm gonna put this code on GitHub, so don't worry about that. If in case you just want to watch the video and do it later, it's gonna be there. But I urge you to code. I think that's how you make mistakes and understand. And comment if there's an issue. So now I want to update. We've got what we call put. So we're gonna map our app to a put. Again, we're using RESTful, so I'm gonna use the same URL for a resource. For you to update, you also have to give us the whatever you want to update with, right? All right. So the delegate is gonna get a blog object. Then you're going to let us know that. Okay, fine. So first of all, you can't update what doesn't exist. You have to verify if it exists. I want you to say variable blog post is equal to, so get the list of blogs, and then you will note that the moment we refresh, the list is gonna get back to 2 things because it's an in memory. So whenever you do that, it wipes everything, right? Because it's not persistent. We're just using it to act as our temporary data store. So first of default, let's find out, does it exist? Okay, again, we're gonna use, so we're gonna say we want the predicate, okay, code ID in our blogs, right? It should, does it equal to something in the blog we are passing there? All right, is it test a condition if it exists? Okay, and if what we get, if the blog post is null, then that thing doesn't exist. Automatically fail fast, return it, or tell the guy this doesn't work. You don't have to compute anything there. Like if you start with if it exists, then it runs, and you have to fail fast. Okay, that's also a topic on its own, but yeah. So if things don't work, tell them there it's not found. Don't spend time pushing things that don't exist. All right, if it does exist, then we want to change the title, okay, to whatever, change the blog post title to whatever you've given me, and also I want you to change the content, but you won't change the ID because the ID is steady. The ID has to be uniquely, okay, because you would have two, then it's going to kill the logic. All right, and then once you've done that, just return, tell them results are okay, it has worked. All right, now let's try that again. Have I Control F5, and I don't know what I'm doing. Control F5. All right, it's building, and it's finished, so it should update. So that's the put. So first of all, like I said, since we've refreshed, rebuilt, we're gonna have two entries. So let's get our entries. They're gonna be two. So I want to change the ID one to, it should be something like new title. So you're gonna come try it out. Then we want the first ID. What do you want to give it? Just call it new title. Call it new title, and call it new content. All right, and then execute. 200, successful. Let's try to get, oh, if we execute the get all, new content, new title. Yeah, you might be saying, okay, how do you do it in Postman? I'm going to copy this as well, because I don't want to type again. So in Postman, you're going to come to your blogs collection and click add request. Call it update blog. I also put this test of Postman in the Git file, so that when you get here, all you change is your local host, wherever you're hosting it. Okay, so update blog, make sure it's a post request, not put request, so it knows. Again, for you to put, you need the response body. We're not going to put it in the URL or the header. So raw JSON, okay, like that. So we want ID 2 to change it to new title 2 and new content 2. Okay, what's our endpoint? Our endpoint is that. So give it, and I want you to send, and you get 200 over there. If you go to get all blogs there and pull again, or you've updated. All right, last one, delete. So for you to delete, what do you need? Just find it. Okay, so all we need is our ID in our delegate. So app.map delete. Again, we're using the same resource endpoint. Okay, keeping it RESTful. Block. All right, so all we need here is just int.id. So this won't be one line because we also want to go and fetch if it exists. So we want to survive blog post. In that blogs, find first what for. Does it exist? If it exists, then I want you to, so p, the delegate p in that list, does it equal to the ID I've given you over there? Again, if it's null, if it doesn't exist, tell the person there and then that not found. We're not going to process it further. Okay, so you're going to return results dot not found. Let them know. All right, if that exists, then we have to remove it from the list. You see, it's suggesting something that's changing something. So in as much as tech is good in suggesting, you also need to know your stuff, because you could end up doing something you don't want to do just by over trusting the AI autocomplete feature. Okay, because what we want here is to say blocks dot remove, right? You want to remove that blog post. Okay, so tag is good, but you need to know your stuff. Maybe that's the classical definition. Do you learn a framework first or the language? Now you can comment in the description. So return results, tell them where we deleted it. Right, now there's one to find out. We're going to refresh and build, Control F5. When you get there, you've got it there. So we've got two get all, we should see two of them. I'm going to delete the second one, like so, ID number 2. Delete 200. Let's try to delete ID number 3. We know it doesn't exist, and you get a 44 error. At least 200 in most cases, most. All right, and if you try to get all, there's one left. And let's go to Postman and finalize that. So right click on blogs, add request, call it delete blog. So you know there's one blog remaining. All right, so make sure it's a delete over there, and we're going to use the same endpoint. That's restful. There's no body here, risk giving. So delete with ID 1. I want you to send that and see what we get. What do we get? We get method not allowed. Okay, wow. Who do we blame? It's supposed to get ID there. All right. So what has it done there? Enforcement. Sometimes you have to explicitly give it to a header. Okay. So it means if you go to your params here, not header, but rather in your params. If you go to your params there, you will see there's params over there, right? So if you give it explicitly ID over there and call it ID number 1, I want you to remove. Okay. So give it ID number 1 and click send. 200. So if you get all blogs, there will be no blog because we've deleted, unfortunately. And it says no blog, but 200 there says it's okay. If you want to have one, you can just go to create blog, and we've got a header there. There's one already, the Blazor one. So that is going to go and create the one we did for Blazor. All right. At this juncture, you've been able to implement a CRUD API. CRUD functionality into an API. You've hooked up an API in minimal time. So this marks the end of this video. If you watch with me till this far, thank you. The code will be available, so also be the Postman request. And from here, things that we could add could be connecting our minimum API to an actual database. And if you've seen, we've used the program CS class extensively, so we could move that functionality outside and put it elsewhere. That's also what we can do. And if you've noticed, if you're new to APIs, then you might not have noticed, but minimum APIs doesn't give you things like validation out of the box. So how do you bring validation? Okay, so those are the areas that we can actually add on to the series. But this is what I wanted to show you, how to implement them and really just be comfortable with them. And if you think this information was valuable, it gave you value, then please subscribe, like, share, comment, and code. Put it into perspective. I want you to build an API on your own, make it complex, and try to consume it also using maybe JavaScript or C# Blazor or whatever suits you. All right. So thank you very much and have a good night.